First question, who are you, what do you do, and what's your experience to bring to the table?
Guest first. Yeah.
Guest first.
Guest. Okay. A long version or a short version?
We have time.
51 years. Time.
Back in the days.
20 years in IT business. I founded the company because I had a neighbor. And he said that I need somebody to blame. So would you take the blame? I said yes. Sort of like following Jim Carrey in that sense. 10 years later, I was in marketing conference. Somebody asked me, Mikk, in which business are you? I said, in IT. Mikk, are you sure? You are in marketing conference. Maybe you are in digital marketing. Then I realized that all our clients were solving some sales challenges, some marketing challenges. Then I went to study marketing on top of business administration. And by then we kicked off a CRM development because their clients kept calling us and asking stupid questions we didn't have answers for. And then the security questions raised, and then we understood that, okay, we need to have some sort of problem, but there's a solution, but we understood that nobody is actually solving this problem. And if somebody is willing to challenge Outlook, then please do reach out to me because I'm looking to escape from Outlook because the old software that we built is much better. 10 years forward, 2019, I walked into a startup day event. Rando Rannus, Siena Secondary. What's the name?
Siena Secondary Fund.
Yeah, Siena Secondary Fund. Rando asked me, Mikk, are you investing? Yes, of course. 20 years in my own businesses. Mikk, are you stupid? Why don't you let others work for you? Why don't you let them eat noodles and be awake at nights? I don't know. I have no money. Mikk, you have some companies. Why don't you sell somebody? Some company. To whom? To a competitor. No. We don't speak to each other. No, it's like hate them. We are not in the same room. A few months later, I was in Innsbruck. And then I was, dumb, whatever. I was playing investor. And then I realized those founders, they don't understand what they are talking about. They know about the product or the service, but they understand the understanding of the business around it. So I ended up being the last man standing there with a guy from Moscow. He used to be this office supply sales guy, and now he's running a business in Austria. His company name is Popsla. Does some sort of like electrical vehicles on the snow, and there's a scooter on the snow. So very crazy stuff. Then I came back to Estonia, and in 2 weeks I realized, no. Yes, we can deliver 300 million emails per month. Yes, we can solve technically really complicated questions. It's all technical. But my ability to contribute and give back to the world is actually much bigger, and my hunger to have a big impact is much bigger. And then 1.5 months forward, I made a deal with those guys I hated the most. I reached out to some other companies as well, but actually the value proposition for me, getting rid of my dear clients who allowed me a nice life, got rid of my employees. I was carefully selecting. They gave me also freedom, so nobody was calling me anymore. And they even gave me some money. And then I was nobody. I was happy. I was taking my dog to swim and back. And that's it.
And then you figured out that you want to invest money and time and energy.
Yeah, that's the other thing. So first of all, my self-esteem dropped a lot. And then I learned that the real estate is a sure thing. So I parked my money there. Everything is cool. It's there. And I was left some pocket money to deal with. And then it took me 2 years actually to realize that, okay, I now understand what the startup economy, a startup scenery is about and how to invest in startups. And I today already said that I really don't understand why I did these first investments. I don't understand myself. But it took me 2 years, and I still fancy the concept of syndicates, where we learn by doing, and where everybody gets to say all these like red flags. So this is also the basis of our current VC, which kind of turned into a hobby, not into business, which you will ask me questions about. So yeah, 2 years it took me there, and I said that it must not take 2 years. You can do it sooner and faster, but in other ways it's really overwhelming to learn everything. And what investors not often talk about is the exit. So and the business owners don't talk about the exits. So the exit strategy and designing exits was kind of my thing at some point. And whenever we look at any investment, then we still always I think that how to get rid of that. And if I can't figure how to get rid of this company, then why should I enter into this business? So it's like for VCs, it's somehow different than just like putting my money somewhere and hoping for the best. It's a really hard work actually behind that.
Cool. Thank you, Mikk, for an intro.
Short version.
Short. Long story, long. But good stuff. I will follow up on some. Andris?
Do you want my life story as well?
We have time.
Shorter version. So I'm Latvian, grew up in Australia and England, came here in the early 90s, randomly got into Stanford to do my MBA, took off to California, was in the US for 9 years in total, worked at tech startups mostly after I graduated, and actually ended up doing 15 plus years in tech startups, marketing, product, biz dev, sales, all sorts of roles. A couple of companies exited for multiple hundreds of millions. Was fun, bankrupted a few startups, and then eventually found myself doing investing. So about 8 years ago, my partners and I set up Change Ventures. It was the first pan-Baltic seed and pre-seed fund. We're now on Fund 3, and we're now investing at pre-seed, early pre-seed. So teams, no revenue, no traction, mostly hardly any idea about product. We're backing teams. And we've done 34 investments, I think, now across the region. My partner's in Estonia, myself, and having a lot of fun working with founders.
Cool. Nice bunch on the stage. So, let's kick off with the beginning. You both have been in founder shoes at the early companies, and you are working with the early stage companies. What are the biggest challenges at the very beginning when people come together? We already explored that question from the founder's perspective, but I'm curious from your perspective. Guests first.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing for us is I mean, it's obviously team, and that's kind of a cliche, but it is everything at the early stage. So I think in the previous panel with the startup founders, the question was, how do you build team? Who does what? And the answer is the founders do everything, like everything, anything and everything that needs to be done. I see some noddings of heads here. Yes. And that's, that's kind of very important, that the people who start the business understand that their job is to do everything and anything that needs to be done to move the ball forwards every day. And that, hopefully you get past that point where you can start to assign responsibilities and build a team that can do various things, and you don't have to do anything and everything. But fundamentally, that's the founder's role from the beginning. And in some sense, it never changes, because every startup goes through oh shit moments many times. And in those oh shit moments, the founders need to be ready to go back to, oh shit, I need to go back and do stuff that I didn't want to do, but is now the most important thing to do in order for this business to survive and thrive, or get to the next point, or not die, most importantly, right? And so this this is like the key early thing for me.
Yeah, I used to be mostly the single founder myself for this 20 years time. And when I tried to convert myself into a business advisor, which I hate because I don't want to sell my hours. And then I realized that a lot of founders, they sort of don't have this attitude that, as Andris was mentioning, that you need to go through everything that is like before you and your success. The clarity is something that they don't sort of understand that they need to make. And even if they understand what is the challenge they need to do, like execute, so they struggle with like execution order. So what challenge they need to address like first. And last year when I was working for free for my own VC, which I was not very successful at, then we...
Loud and proud.
Yeah, but it was a journey. I'm now much wiser and less rich. We learned that actually some companies get to some like phase when they're able to raise money, and still after burning like 500K, they don't know who's the ICP, what they're actually selling, what is the problem, what is the solution. So going back to the basics, it's been sort of like annoying. So how it's possible. So that is sort of like the one learning, and another perhaps is that sometimes they need this external like advice, push or question to understand what sort of challenge they are against to, and then ours as investors' responsibility is actually to understand whether they understand how to crack those challenges. And then if they know how to crack it, then are they capable of executing? So if they're not, then why would we invest? No. And there are other questions that we reached out. But this is an important one, I think, on top of that.
Yeah. For the angels or investors in the audience, how you evaluate that? Like you come in and it's just a person in front of you or on the other end of the screen, and then it's like, okay, go. How you evaluate that they actually are, or it's just leap of faith?
So I think we prefer to invest after we've seen the founders for a while, as long as possible, because the longer you have to see founders make decisions, understand why they made wrong decisions, react to that, execute, deliver something, not deliver something, rethink what they're doing. The more data you have, the better an understanding you have of how the founders can perform. So hence we try and meet founders as early as possible. And some of the investments we've made have been founders that we've known from their previous startup, which may not have worked out, and where we've invested in their next startup, because we know them already for a while, and we've seen and we've understood what they learned from the previous experience, and we think this next experience might be different. But absent that, it's largely gut feel. It's really gut feel. Like, you have to ultimately make a subjective decision as an investor as to whether you believe that person or that set of people, team, it's usually multiple, have the ability to build something really big.
Yeah, for me, the story is pretty much like similar, but it started from the angel investor's career of mine. So I spent my time working with startups, and then after 2 months, I noticed I was working like around and my eyebrows were up. I couldn't explain what was wrong. So just the feeling that something is not right. So, and out of that, we had some startups, and I had my co-founder with a VC. So I had to like leave him and proceed with a new co-founder, because the same thing. So it didn't work out, and I couldn't get things done. And now we have in this our process, we have 2 months validation time. We don't compete with other like incubators and accelerators. We don't compete with VCs. We rather collaborate because it's like learning that for me the competition is stupid. among ourselves, because everybody has their own ICP, everybody has their own process, everybody has their own unique sales proposition. So after this 2 months validation time, we sort of get the same understanding. And then we check whether there is a business case, and also we check whether there is a trust issues solved. And we ask ourselves questions like, would we hire those founders ourselves if we had the chance?
That's a legit question.
But I think there's a really important point there, Mikk, which you made, which is one of the most important attributes of successful founders is that they're able to learn and they're able to make decisions to change, throw away things they thought were absolutely important, priority and correct, and pivot, really rethink things and do that without, a lot of heartache. And so, for example, we invested in a company called Aerones, does wind turbine inspection and maintenance robotics. They're originally famous for building an industrial drone that picked someone up and did a first parachute jump off of a drone. I passed, when they came and pitched the drone idea that was going to do various things. 2 years later, they'd actually dumped the drone. They have a different technology which works really well for the industry they're in, but they were ready to actually dump several years of investment and thinking about, drones and electric motors and everything, and like completely rebuild what they're doing because they found a problem and they found a better way to solve the problem. And it's important, that the teams have this thinking that, what is the problem they're solving? What is the best way to do it? And what is the fastest path to get there, and be ready to drop everything they've done, at sunk cost, it's whatever, it's gone, and rethink that.
It's perhaps to add here is persistence is something that really differentiates people. So if you're doing this client interviews and then getting answers that why these guys are there and why they are valuable, because they actually solve the problems, they go to the root problems. And what else I wanted to say? I lost it already. There was too many things that...
Yeah, there's action happening. So, we spoke about the beginning of the journey, but Mikk, you already mentioned the end, the exit. And that's actually something what startups don't think that much. And that's one of the topics I think which is important, because sometimes you have nice idea, nice business probably, but is there an exit? And startups don't think a lot of times. So what's your take, how you work with companies and ideas and try to get that exit feel probably at the beginning?
It was spoken today already that second exit is much better than first exit. My first exits were not very successful. I got rid of my loans. I got rid of something, but then now I realize that I've done all the possible exit strategies. So understanding why your exit failed makes you think of differently how to exit next time. And it's the same for VCs. So you need to think of the exit strategy. And I was talking just in Prague last year when I with my shaking legs took the stage and announced that yes, we are VC, wanna be VC at the time. And then I was speaking with some company, and they're claiming, we are building accounting software. Okay, what's the why? It's what's the reason for that? Oh no, it's we do the same thing like everybody else has done in the different countries, because we have so unique system in Czech Republic. And then I spoke with the next company, and they claim exactly the same story. So, and the question was that, okay, we have everything built in, in Estonia, I think in Latvia, in Lithuania. So why are you doing this? Why are you spending your youth and time and investors' money? Why you do it? So what's the end game? What for? So who benefits of that? No, we do the same software. It's the same thing. Everything is good. Service is there, clients is there, software is there. Why? So is it customer base that you're building? So what's the exit asset you're building actually? Where you spend your time? So if you know that, and if you know to to whose puzzle this piece fits, then it seems like it's a business.
Let me make it interesting and disagree with you a bit. So I think it's very hard to know that up front. At the day you're starting a business, it's extremely hard to predict exactly where this asset as a business you build might have value. Sometimes you can do it, and it's definitely worth thinking about. But I think, the two main things I would say is, so first, a business that generates a shit ton of profits and cash will always be worth money to someone. And the more cash and profits it generates, the better, right? So that's one. Build businesses that make money, right? Is sort of the obvious bottom line, but you would be surprised how many people forget about that, especially in the last few years of craziness. But the second thing is that when you talk about acquisitions, especially by strategic investors, so companies that are buying a startup to integrate them into their products or by their customers, or somehow integrated them into what they're doing, they very rarely buy a startup that they don't know already, or that they don't have a reason for doing business with in the first place. And so the most important thing there is to start to build relationships with those bigger companies, not day one usually, but at the point in time when you have something that you can offer them, and start to build those relationships and think about how you can work with those bigger companies, because they are by far the most likely acquirers of startups. And they start with the question of, how is this going to help my business? So if you figure that out first and figure out how you can do a business deal, a partnership, a reseller agreement, whatever it is, a licensing agreement or something, that often becomes the foundation. And often those discussions at the right time can turn into acquisition discussions. So a relevant example here in Latvia is Nordigan, one of the companies we backed very early, that was acquired by Go Cardless last year. So the discussions with Go Cardless were about partnership. So Go Cardless was looking to build their fintech. They have a payments solution. They were looking to build their open banking business, and Nordigan had a very aggressive, the best freemium open banking solution out there. They were talking about how to collaborate, and that turned into an acquisition discussion. There's a long story behind it, but that's how it turned into. But it started from a business discussion. So I think those are the kind of two things you can think about up front. And if you can do the magic thing that Mikk said of coming up with the exit option up front, you're an ace. Amazing.
Yeah, usually you don't know that up front. I agree with that. But
you can hypothesize for sure.
Yes. At least like more or less you can guess where it ends, and therefore you can prepare yourself. So how you run the business and what sort of decisions you make over the time. Another aspect that I've noticed is that some people fly high already from the day zero. So the expectation of a possible exit has been designed from the day zero. So it's way bigger. It's not like selling some assets to some company which wants to fill the puzzle, but they have their own game. So they sort of try to set the category. So it's not an easy, and you don't know this upfront fully.
But the last thing I'd also say is, you can try and engineer it, but it's important to enjoy the journey, right? So being a founder especially, right? So working in a startup as an employee is one experience. Being a founder is a completely different level of other experience. And most people in this world are not psychologically built to do that crazy shit that it takes to actually be a founder. And you have to want to go through that journey, have that excitement of the ups and downs, and be really enjoy the adrenaline rush that comes with it, that means you can survive the inevitable crashes. And you have to want to enjoy the journey. Otherwise, it's gonna suck.
Okay. So I got everything. How much should I give away to the investor? Is it half the company, or how that gets determined? That's typical question. I have an idea how much it's of course the best idea, and it's now worth millions already because that's the best idea. I will tell you when we agree. But how you determine the value or how founders should think about the process valuing the company or figuring out how much to give away?
Yeah, we are playing very early, so we don't really want to have discussion with founders how much percentage we would have. We rather talk about the money and what they will do with this, so how far it takes them. And so far, in this last VC, we closed only 2 deals. So basically, both deals happen to be convertible loans.
What does it mean, convertible loan?
We give them a loan, and then we see after how much it was worth, and whether it played out, and whether we got interest, whether we got shares. We don't know, and basically that's where the name comes. We don't know what stage it is. So, is it floating? Is it flight stage? Is it fucked up stage? We don't know. We just give them time. We let them be the true themselves, and we let them execute. We help them. We support them, but not too much. We don't drag them. We don't push them.
So the question how much to give away, basically with the convertible loan, it's postponed.
Yes.
It can be, it might not be.
Yeah, well, you can structure it in that way.
There's different ways of doing this. So we actually have an approach where we consider convertible loans to be just a different form of equity. It's a different agreement, but in our heads, it's an equity investment. And when we so convertible loans basically are structured where it's a loan, you're lending money to the company, but you have the right to convert to shares. In our fund's view, we always fix a conversion cap, which is the value at which it converts. And we say, you and I agree, this is the value, right? Where it's like an equity investment, only we're doing it in the form of a loan, but you and I agree this is the value. Because for us, we don't like kicking the valuation can conversation down the road. We'd rather agree. If we don't agree, we don't have an investment, and that's simple. And so in terms of percentage you're giving away in a round, so we would generally say investment rounds are typically anywhere in the range of sort of 5 or 10% to maybe a maximum of 30%, I would say, in an investment round. That's a big range. Typical is sort of 10 to 20%. And there's a bunch of literature out there. You can look at cap table restructuring. Actually, if you want to look up something very new, Jenny Fielding, an investor from New York, just yesterday posted a guide to, I think it was euphemistically called How Not to Fuck Up Your Cap Table. She has, I know she's written stuff on this before. Like you want to not give away too much equity such that future rounds you have, the investors won't walk up there and say, you founders have not enough incentive to go through the crazy life that you have to make something really big. Therefore, we're not interested in investing. And I can tell you, we have these conversations on a regular basis where we're like, looks interesting, but until you fix that cap table, we're not interested.
Yeah, but it's a bit even trickier. We were simplifying here the game. So from the VC perspective, the game is a bit different. And from a founder's perspective, it's different. Founders need money. Investors want to get rid of the investment at some point. So what is your strategy to get rid of the investment? And what are the returns? So to whom you're going to sell these shares of yours? How big the player you are? So are you to define the round sizes? Are you define the valuations? Maybe I'm not in a position to bargain. I just have to accept the offer I'm getting.
That may be the case, and you may or may not regret accepting the offer that you have, and that's life, and you have to deal with it. So there are situations where cap tables get restructured. But those are painful.
Yeah, that's I can put my VC hat on, and a lot of times there's yada yada yada, but they have fucked up cap table, and then everyone is just like, okay, what's in it? And it's like you already can smell the package, and then you open it up and look what's happening in there, how complicated it would be to fix it, or sometimes it's just just don't bother. And so advice from my side, if sometimes there's, there was no one giving the money, but then I got these two people, they took 40% of the company, added some crazy clause in the agreement, and then down the road, it's hard to fix.
Yeah, you can do that, but then you should assume that that is the last amount of money you will ever raise. And you need to make the company profitable on that money, right? Because you may not be able to raise any more money, or it will be very painful to do so. So that's kind of in your head what you should think about. If that's the situation you have, the only option you have to raise money is on those kind of terms. That's kind of how you should look at it.
But also from the VC's perspective, the investor's perspective, looking at the terms that the company has raised money. So I've turned down several cases where it didn't make any sense to have this case in our portfolio because we wouldn't get rid of that or wouldn't make enough money, or the risks for our investors were just like too big.
Cool. Do we have questions from audience? Just like, yeah. Venture winter.
Did we feel the venture winter, which is happening this year? It's still here. Can you feel the cold? It's freezing. It's butt freezing cold. I can tell you it's really fucking hard to raise money now.
As a VC.
It's hard to raise money as a VC. It's hard to raise money as a startup. Pre-seed and seed is not so bad. So actually AngelList just released today their analysis of the last quarter's data, which said that valuations and funding activity was the lowest they've ever seen in their recorded, experience of data, which was, 20 years or whatever it is.
Last year's unicorns are not unicorns this year.
Exactly. But that's the main point, is that actually Series A, B, C, and on funding is almost non-existent right now. So I talked to one of the big top global brands, and like last year they did one investment period globally, but their teams are all going around talking to all the startups, asking questions, getting them to send them decks and data and everything, but they're not doing any fucking investments, right? And so at those stages, I can tell you it's brutal. So companies who have to raise Series A, B, C, it's really, really hard.
Any? Yep.
When you look at the cap tables, do you consider also the founder shares? Like if one of the founders is like holding 70% of the shares, one holding 15%, and then one is 10%, but they do have some kind of agreement in between. How do you look at that?
This is also like part of the due diligence. So you need to understand the team dynamics and how the relations are built. So basically, we just waited with one company a long time because we couldn't believe those guys are so pragmatic. They had some internal fight going on, and they said that they resolved it, and we didn't believe it's possible. So it didn't make sense to me. I wouldn't taken this deal myself ever. But this guy took, so we had to make sure that it's a real thing. It did turn out it is, and they are still working, and it's working fine. And actually, the buzz factor is not going to happen due to that reason. And there was a rollback mechanism set in place. So if one founder wasn't to execute, then it was a rollback. But it wasn't like 70-25. It was rather 50-50 type of thing about themselves. And it was also raising questions, how is that possible? But the founder of the concept is giving away his shares because other founder was doing something. Yeah, so it was really tricky question for us about it. It's fine today.
So I think this is a really interesting question. So to give you sort of the qualitative data, so not all the companies we back have equal shares between the founders, for sure. There are companies we back that have unequal shares between founders. say many of them do have equal shares between founders, and in some sense that makes things easier in the sense that everyone's kind of in the boat, but it does also require that the founders are of somewhat equal, typically experience and sort of stature or whatever, relationship. And if there is a disbalance there, so we've seen some teams where you have, one more experienced founder who will typically be CEO with several other founders who are less experienced and an unequal share distribution. It's a bit harder to make those work, because there is an inevitable disbalance, and it requires that person who has the biggest share to really take the responsibility that's with that biggest share, but not abuse it, and make sure that they are bringing their co-founders along. And they're in some sense, sub-co-founders, right, at that stage. And so you have some awkward dynamics that can get a bit messy. So it's something we definitely look at. There isn't it's not a deal killer if the shares are not equal, but it's a complication. At the same time, I've seen situations where there's equal shareholding between the founders, and after a while you realize that some of the founders clearly are not pulling their weight. They're not able to deliver the same value as the others. And then you have one of these like messy situations that you need to resolve. So you need to renegotiate somehow, or someone has to leave, or something has to give, right? I think the one thing I'd say is really important for everyone to think about and know exists is something called reverse vesting. So I don't know how many people know what reverse vesting is. Basically, it's something that typically actually investors impose when they invest, but ideally founders should actually set that up from day one, I would say, in a founders agreement, and reverse vesting basically means we will agree that while all of us, let's say 3 of us own 1/3 of the company each, that 1/3 will vest over, let's say, 4 years, and that if one of the founders leaves after 2 years, then they only get to keep half of that third, and the other half they have to give back to the company to be shared among the other founders or given to someone new who takes over the responsibility, because it's someone who's not, committing to take the time to work for the time it takes to make this successful, or at least some significant amount of time. So that's important. And we want the founders to be full-time committed to the business.
Good first investors bring in these agreements. There was one more question. Yep. How to choose startup where you want to work? Work in the one which seems awesome. Because there's no other way, I guess.
But there's different kinds, right? So there's startups at different stage of development. There's bigger startups. So we're going to have James from Printify here, right? So Printify is a big company already. It's still a startup, runs as a startup, but it's a much bigger company. So when you come in, you'll have a much more specialized, narrow role of something you can do for that company. And then you can learn a, specific role, and, gain experience in that role. If you join a startup very early, even not as a founder, you are more likely to have an experience which is founder-like, i.e. doing whatever the fuck the company needs you to do today, which will often vary. And that can be a great experience. The first startup I joined, I was employee number 7. I wasn't a founder. I worked there for 9 years, did a whole bunch of different roles, and worked directly for the founders and learned a ton. And so, that can be a great experience. You have a lot of opportunity, but you don't have to take the founder role from day one.
Yeah, perhaps I would add that look for the culture, look for the values, and it certainly has to match your own development stage. So what you actually want to do with your life. So are you after the impact? Are you after the cash? Are you after to become a founder, maybe to learn something from this company? So what you could bring to the company? What are your the added value to the company? So what can you improve there? So like from the VC's perspective, it's like nothing we can add here. It's like other topic actually.
Yeah. Any more questions? Ilse? Toxic?
Yeah. So that you talked before, how many cases you actually fix the problem?
You mean toxic cap tables?
Yeah.
So actually, I can give you numbers. So if the 34 investments we've done, I think in 2 cases, we actually spent, and in, no, 3 cases. We spent in each one, I think, 6 to 12 months working with the founders, effectively helping them renegotiate with their original investors. And those were exceptions where we really liked the founders, we believed in what they're doing, and we thought it was worth putting in the investment. But that's like a big ask, and that's, you know, an exception we wouldn't do everywhere. But there are occasions when we think it makes sense, and so that's the statistics. Sorry? What field are they in? All sorts. They're B2B startups, some doing consumer. It's, I mean, everything. It's not field related. It's really, it's a situation the founders got into where they felt they didn't have options. They took money on terms that didn't allow them to raise further money, but we felt that was an exciting enough investment potential where we would help them resolve that. But it really takes time, and it's a risk for us in the sense that, you know, it takes a long time to resolve. So you know, the marketer better not have left by the time you sort it out. So it's not easy.
But this might have been a game for somebody else who did this deliberately. It was his exit strategy, perhaps.
Yeah, toxic cap tables. I recall one we looked into, and basically there was it was a convertible loan there with without expiration date, and they could convert
like a safe.
Yeah, they could convert at any time they wanted. Basically, what does it mean in the human language? They invested 50K, and they could convert that to the shares, whatever they wanted, and get whatever percentage. It basically was really toxic, and we said to the founders that they have to fix it if we move forward.
Yeah, and one other point, Ilse, is I think we actually do this much more often than most investors.
Yeah,
at Change Ventures. So most investors will almost never do this.
Yeah.
So my partner and I just happen to be masochists, right? But you know, it's most investors will they'll have the conversation until they find out the cap table, and then they'll give you some kind of, you know, mamby-pamby excuse as to why the market's not big enough, and they won't. And actually, the reason will be the cap table's fucked.
But is it that every startup is broken at some extent? So is it a cap table? Is it something else? Basically, it's your chance to help them.
Yeah, but at the same time, we have limited time to invest our investors' money. So we have investors whose money we're investing alongside ours, and so we have to make a choice. And those are big projects to help figure, because the only way these things typically get resolved is, and they're usually angel investors who have taken much too much ownership for the investment they made. The only way these things typically get involved is, recently we did one where we wrote a 2-page document where we explained, here's what you would need to do in terms of share ownership in order for us to proceed to actually even looking at making an investment. And those angel investors would not renegotiate anything until they had a piece of paper from an investor that said, all right, if we do this, then maybe we could get an investment. And that's the trouble, is that the founders typically have a hard time renegotiating this because they did shake hands and make an agreement to give 40% of the company, right? They did that. So the angel investor comes back and says, what the fuck? You made this agreement with me, right? What's the problem? You agree. So it takes often external pressure, and that's work. And most investors don't want to do that work for good reason.
It's an opportunity cost. Spend time on this one or look at 5 others.
Exactly.
And then I was told that investing is not an ethical business.
But there's always a case where you spend time and everything can be fixed. I think Verif is the crazy example. One single founder, 90% for angels at some point, and they fixed the cap table.
Yeah, Verif was fixed.
Yeah, 90% was for early investors, and it's uninvestable, but they managed to fix it. So cool. I think, Agate, we are done, right? Let's say thank you to my panelists.
Thank you.
Woo!